Hello and good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I am so incredibly privileged and honored to be on this stage today with two extraordinary icons, Dr. Morris Chang and Joe Tsai, who have both founded and created extraordinary, powerful companies, Alibaba and TSMC, with a combined market cap today of over $625 billion. Extraordinary. And so today I thought we would start the conversation with you, Dr. Chang. You were born in China and you lived in Hong Kong, but educated in the US at MIT and also at Stanford. For those of us in the room who haven't had the pleasure of reading your wonderful biography, tell us, what was the vision behind starting TSMC in Taiwan?
Well, at the time I started TSMC, I had been in the semiconductor business for almost 30 years already. I was at Texas Instruments. I started at a company called Sylvania, the semiconductor division of Sylvania. And then I went to Texas Instruments in 1958 when I was 27 years old. And as Ida just said, I had bachelor's and master's degree already, but about 2 or 3 years after I got to Texas Instruments, they appreciated me enough to send me to Stanford to get my PhD on full salary and full expenses. They pay the tuition, they pay the miscellaneous expenses, and they gave me full salary. In fact, I also had the opportunity to go to technical meetings at TI's expense. Anyway, it was a good opportunity, so I went to Stanford to get my PhD. And in return for all this, of course, I had to commit myself to work 5 years at least in TI after I got my PhD. Well, it turned out that I worked 20 years more. So altogether, from the beginning to the end, I worked at TI for 25 years. Anyway, and then, TI for various reasons started to go downhill. Not my fault, okay. but because they went into a different business, a different business than a business that they were successful in, which was the semiconductor business. So instead of just staying fast in the semiconductor business, they went into consumer products business, calculators, digital watches, and finally, worst of all, disastrously, they went into the so-called home computer business. Anyway, for all those reasons, TI went downhill. And also the US, this was in the early 80s already. In the US, I think, was losing its competitive advantages in chips manufacturing. So at about that time, there was an interlude in another company where I was the president, but it wasn't a very good fit for me either. So at that point, Taiwan government asked me to head up their research institute, Industrial Technology Research Institute. And while there, while I was there, the Taiwan government also wanted me to start a semiconductor company. So with all the semiconductor experience already behind me, I decided that it would be suicidal for Taiwan, for me, to start a semiconductor company in Taiwan at that time. And it was 1985. At that time, it was suicidal to start a normal, standard IDM company in Taiwan. We would have to compete with the likes of Texas Instruments, Intel, National, Fairchild, all these established companies, not to mention Japanese companies. And so instead of using the standard business model, which was to do everything from design to wafer chip manufacturing to sales marketing. So I looked at the whole picture and decided that Taiwan has had competitive advantages, and I will not go into what those were at that time, but maybe later, maybe, yeah. Had competitive advantage just in the chips manufacturing part of this chain. So we started this new business model of being just a foundry, which is just the manufacturing, wafer manufacturing, chips manufacturing part of the then standard model, standard business model of design and manufacturing, so on. Now, anyway, and we were successful, and that was we began raising funds and so on in 1985, and we officially started our operation in 1987, and so it has been 36 years now, and we've been quite successful, and we became, in fact, the largest manufacturing company, and I think I'm not sure how our revenue compares with all the other semiconductor companies, but we are among the top. TSMC will have a revenue of something like $60-70 billion. So we are among the top there. Yeah.
I think Dr. Chang is being quite modest when he says that he assumes it's it is the company in the world.
Well,
so congratulations. And Joe, you have a similar story in that you're a Taiwanese Canadian, but you were also educated in the U.S., right? You went to Lawrenceville, Yale Law, and then you went to the legal industry before dabbling in private equity. So how did you get into Alibaba? How did you found this new company with Jack Ma?
I just realized I took the wrong turn and went legal instead of doing chips or computer science. But I was born in Taiwan, grew up there until I was 13, and then my parents sent me to school in the United States. In fact, Dr. Chang just earlier today reminded me that when he got to Taiwan, one of the first people he met was my father, who was a lawyer that represented Texas Instruments. And
small world.
The first person, actually.
The first person.
Because he was standing at the end of the, back then there was no walkway, you know what I mean?
Right.
It was, yeah.
The staircase
yeah.
below the plane.
He was standing right there, you know.
So,
yeah.
Exactly. So, and then he also reminded me that I have an uncle who worked at Intel Motorola and had a lot of chip patents under his name. And Dr. Chang tried to hire my Uncle Roger
Unsuccessfully.
So you can imagine, as a kid growing up in Taiwan, Dr. Chang is just the role model and an iconic person. So I'm absolutely honored to share the same stage with Dr. Chang today.
Likewise. Absolutely.
You're supposed to tell your story.
And Ida, what was the question? U.S. education and how...
And then how did you come about moving and pivoting from private equity and a legal background into founding this company with Jack?
So the lawyers don't make any decisions. Lawyers only advise people. So I wanted to get into a role where I can actually be involved in decision making. And that's why I went into private equity. For someone with a legal background to go into private equity was fairly adjacent, I would say, because lawyers have to do documents and in these M&A transactions and things like that. So, and then from private equity, I got lucky. I met Jack Ma in 1999 through a friend's introduction. Another friend from Taiwan, and then I went to his second floor apartment in this unit called the Lakeside Gardens, and it was a room full of young, fresh-faced, wide-eyed people that are following Jack. They're sort of the disciples of Jack, and that was the rest was history.
Incredible! Wow. Well, I think it's safe to say that everyone that we speak to these days, particularly the large CEOs around the world, the number one thing on their mind is the decoupling of US and China and the bifurcation of the two countries. Where do you see that headed, Joe? I'll start with you.
I think there's a couple of reasons for that's driving the decoupling. I think governments nowadays around the world, not just US and China, but governments around the world are worried about security, national security, and also they're worried about digital security. So when you go to Europe, people talk about digital sovereignty, making sure that their citizens and their data privacy is protected. And for those reasons, I think supply chain is now being decoupled, and also in the digital world, we actually see a lot of fragmentation in the digital world.
Morris, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the best book that I have read on this phenomena was probably Graham Anderson's book. I think that I forgot the title. I remember the subtitle, The Thucydides Trap. It was, situation where the existing power, which is the United States, is confronting the emerging power, which is China. And Graham Anderson actually, I believe he is a professor at Harvard Kennedy School. And I believe that he actually conducted a class 5 years. For 5 years, he studied the examples of the Thucydides trap. And for the last 500 years, I believe, the class, they found something like 18 examples where an existing power confronted an emerging power. And in those 18 cases, 12 of them resulted in war, and 6, however, did not. The most recent of the 6 that did not result in war was, for instance, the Cold War, Soviet Union and US. It was just Cold War. But of course, now you said decoupling. Now, yes, we can see it. And our only hope, my only hope, our only hope is that it doesn't lead into anything even more serious, even more serious.
And Dr. Chang, on that point, do you see an impact already on some of the technological innovation and newness that's happening in the region because of this bifurcation and decoupling?
Well, I think that decoupling will ultimately slow down everybody. Of course, the purpose of it is the immediate purpose, of course, is to slow China down, and I think it's doing that. I'm specifically talking about chips, of course. I don't know some of the other areas. About chips, I think the immediate purpose of decoupling is to slow China down, and I think it's doing that. Ultimately, I think maybe, and let's say maybe, I think ultimately, I think it will be harmful to everybody, you know. I mean, I think the world, if we all work together, maybe it will progress faster. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Joe, investor sentiment into the region, into Asia, has been quite challenged recently. What would you say that we should be thinking about to make sure we don't lose that dynamism, right, in the region? How can we gain back that investor confidence into the region?
I think Asia is a big place, but I think a lot of the cultures in Asia are quite similar in that people are industrious, and these economies have provided very high levels of education to the population. So for investors, the question you should ask investors is, do you want to bet against people in Asia, right? People who are hardworking and who are educated. And it's a place that people have to be because I think you talk about dynamism. I think Asia is still a very dynamic place. I think we've seen a slowdown in China of the economy, but there's a ton of industrious people, hardworking people, working on new technologies, working on the fact that China is today is the largest manufacturing of the country in the world, and in the future, I still see China as being a manufacturing powerhouse. Maybe not to the extent of making very high-end chips, because that takes time to acquire the know-how. But just the sheer demographics of China, you're looking at about 800 million people that are in the labor force, and 200 of them are educated, highly educated, skilled, highly skilled labor. There's also a vocational school system. At lunchtime we talk about vocational schools. People that are working on the shop floors, that are sort of engineering supervisors that could create, make things. So I think Asia continues to be a dynamic place because culturally people are hardworking and very entrepreneurial.
On the topic of education, if you could just spend a moment with me on that, because Dr. Chang, you said in your book, and also I read, that one of the reasons that you moved to Taiwan, in addition to the government asking you to go there, was that there's a lot of talent there, right? You saw a lot of talented individuals that could really help you build the business that you were looking to build. So talk to me a little bit about your views of education in Asia versus education in the US, which you both had the pleasure of attending.
Well, I was, when I said there was a lot of talent, I meant specifically manufacturing talent.
Yes.
In manufacturing, you need, you really don't need very many geniuses. You don't need very many innovative thinkers. Yeah, you need a few, but not very many. but you need a lot of people who are disciplined, who know their specific trade, repair and maintenance people, supervisory, production supervisors, and production engineers. So in Taiwan, they have a lot of trade schools. Those are for people who don't get to go to colleges. There's an examination after high school graduation, and only 20 or 30% of people pass the exam. Now, only 20 or 30% of high school graduates get to go to the colleges, the general purpose colleges. But most of the rest can go to these trade schools, 3-year trade schools, 5-year trade schools, and they learn specific skills which allow them really to get pretty good jobs after they graduate from those trade schools. So that's one advantage that the Taiwan education system does have.
Joe, any thoughts on education?
Well, two things. I think American schools, whether it's a high school, boarding school, or university, or higher master PhD programs, is still aspirational for most people around the world. Parents still want to send their kids to the United States to be educated here, and that's because this country has a system that fosters freedom of thinking and so the geniuses, if you will, really can become even better, the elite. I think American universities are very good at training the elite, and people that have graduated from PhD programs from around the world go back to their countries and contribute in a great way. If you look at the heads of major technology companies in the United States, they come from all over the world, and they are beneficiaries of an American high-end education. But these are CEOs. What about the rest, right? What about the kid that kind of went to a liberal arts college and ended up being an Uber driver? That's not. So the thing that we have talked about at lunchtime is United States doesn't have a vocational school program. Even in China, Taiwan has the vocational school program. Even in China, you're looking at 10 million university graduates every year, but then there's about 6 million of vocational school graduates who they basically have given up going to college in middle school. They don't even enter into the same kind of competitive examination system to get into high school. So they went on this vocational track. And when you are developing a manufacturing economy, that's very handy. That it's a benefit to have a population of people who don't aspire to work on large language models and computer science, but they can work on a shop floor, manufacturing floor, and supervise the work there. So that's the main difference between the two.
I agree with Joe that the United States really has the best top-tier educational institutions. The Ivy League schools, MIT, and so on. No equal. There's no equal in the world to that tier of education.
We in the legal profession would like to say Yale Law School is a great theoretical school, and the students come out and fail the bar exam. But Harvard Law School is more like a trade school. Sorry.
So over lunch, we were discussing a bit about understanding, about the importance of communication. right? The way that we can better understand the differences between the countries, right? To maybe perhaps bring some more convergent ideas together on the table. What would your advice be to other leaders in the U.S. or other CEOs in the U.S. of how to better understand and work with China and more broadly with Asia?
You asking me? Well, I certainly would advise them to talk more and so on. If it's any use, it's usually, frankly, unfortunately, it's particularly if they're already top people in either business or government, it's not very useful to give them advice on how to be more cooperative, how to be.
Joe, how do we increase the understanding?
Well, I think it used to be that business people just minded their own business. They have fiduciary obligation to their shareholders, and they say, we just kind of stay out of the press, do our own business, and that's it. But I think we live in a much more complex geopolitical world where communication is absolutely important. I think businesses from both U.S. and China need to communicate with each other. Without communication, there's a lot of room for misunderstanding. And if you have misunderstanding, then you let the lack of trust accumulate, and that could create a lot of conflicts. And so I think it behooves even people in business to travel a lot, talk to different communities in different countries, and share their viewpoints. Even if you argue with each other, I think it's a good thing. Communication is so key to increasing understanding, and which ultimately leads for trust building and a peaceful world.
Extremely well said, Joe. Thank you for that. Dr. Chang, I'm going to pivot a little bit because you at TSMC have developed the most sophisticated, smallest 3 nanometer chips in Taiwan. You shared with us over lunch that in Arizona, in the next 1 or 2 years, they're going to catch up with that ability to develop the smallest, most sophisticated chips in the world. Tell us how you think about staying ahead of the curve. How do you continue to do that and have the dominance there? Share with us your vision.
Well, in the chip business, there is already so far there is a preset course for us to follow, and that's the so-called Moore's law. It was just a prediction made by Gordon Moore in 1965. He said that the density of transistors on a chip will double every 18 months. So to double the density, every 18 months to 24 months, you have to make this transistor smaller all the time. And that's why, we have made the transistors from microns, from the size that you could look at under an optical microscope, to the present size of 2 nanometers, 3 nanometers, that, my goodness, you need very high power electron microscopes to look at. Anyway, but that course has been miraculously effective for the last 50, 60 years. However, that course looks like it's near the end also, because physically, we are pretty close to atomic size already, and you can get smaller than an atom. Anyway, very small. So that course is at the end. However, there's another course we can follow, That is, even if we can't make the chips any denser, we can make them less energy consumptive. We can, more energy efficient, and that's the course we're following. Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask Dr. Chang and Joe leadership traits, because I'm sure we're all in this room waiting to hear your guidance and your observations on what characteristics young individuals need today to be successful future leaders.
Well, I think that they need to, first of all, they need to establish a knowledge base. I'm a believer of the so-called knowledge pyramid. First, you gain information, but if you think about the information that you have enough, then it becomes your own. It becomes knowledge. Knowledge is something that you own, really. And then if you think about your knowledge enough, you begin to gain insight. And that's a higher level. That's another higher level of the information pyramid. And then you also have to develop this pyramid in different fields, because nowadays, if you just know a technical field, it's not enough. You have to know other things. You have to know business strategy. You have to know. You even have to know geopolitics. So all these together, several pyramids, and each pyramid you build up to a certain level of competence or a certain level of expertise, and then you combine these, you start to have a vision, a viable vision. And I'm talking about, you're asking me about leaders, right? I think that leaders have to do this, get a vision, and then of course you have to persuade people to follow you. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah. So,
Fantastic.
So I think in order to be a good leader, I'll say three words: intellect, EQ, and humility. Intellect is a combination of aptitude and hard work. I didn't get perfect SAT scores, but I tried to learn as much as possible on new subjects and things like that. So Dr. Chang talked about knowledge building. You have to have that basic level of knowledge and intellect in order to get respect from the people that you're trying to lead. The next thing, EQ. I think you, as a leader, you're leading, what are you leading? You're not leading machines, you're leading people. So you need to deal with people, and I think the most important sort of skill set is to convince other people to do things that they don't want to do, but you want them to do. So you have to have a lot of EQ to do that. And finally, humility is very important. I've said this many times before, so you might have heard, if you get tired, just let me know. But Jack Welch used to say that you have to have the humility to hire people smarter than you are. To bring people into the company that are more talented, smarter, because Jack Welch said, A people hire other A people, B people hire C people. You have a lot of people, managers that are insecure about themselves, so they end up not hiring very good talent because they feel threatened all the time. Leaders can't do that. Leaders have to hire people that are smarter than they are, and if they feel like they have to be the smartest person in the room all the time, it's not a good leader.
Well, thank you both so much for the pearls of wisdom. It was incredibly insightful and helpful, the pyramid and all of the wonderful comments that you've made too, Joe, and I particularly resonate with the EQ. You don't hear enough leaders talking about the importance of EQ and humility. So very, very much resonates. I'm going to pivot now, Joe, to sports.
Thank you.
Brooklyn Nets.
This is more relaxing
we have
for me.
the San Diego Seals, the Brooklyn Nets. So what made you foray into sports?
Yeah, I actually think this is very interesting. In this country, in America, Asians are not well known to be, sports figures, right? Other than Jeremy Lin, I don't think you can name another Asian athlete in this country. And so I get that question a lot from people like, Joe, why are you involved in sports? You're not supposed to. Like the subtext is, you're not supposed to be involved in sports. Well, I happen to be very passionate about sports. I was an athlete when I was very young. When I was growing up in Taiwan, we had baseball and dodgeball. But
did you play?
No, not like the movie Dodgeball, but those who grew up in Taiwan understand exactly what I'm talking about. So when I got to the U.S., I went to an all-boys boarding school. So the only way I could sort of get people to accept it into the community, was to play a lot of sports, because that's how you get respect. Not in the classroom. I was better than everyone else in math, but I didn't get respect that way. I got respect on the football field. I played American football in high school, and then I picked up lacrosse because I was cut from the baseball team. So that's my background in sports, and getting into the Brooklyn Nets was actually just serendipity. I had never dreamt of growing up to own a sports team, a professional sport team of the magnitude like a team in the NBA. But it just came along as an opportunity. The more I looked at it, basically to own a major professional sports league team in the United States is like owning a rare asset. It's like owning that Park Avenue apartment, penthouse apartment on Park Avenue. The value is not going to go down. You're not going to make a lot of operating cash flow, but when you do sell it, the value will appreciate most likely. So knowing that economically my downside was protected, that's what motivated me to sort of jump in and sort of pursue my passion.
Wonderful. Well, we have time for just one last question. The time has flown by already, but I'm going to ask the question to both of you, and we'll start with you, Dr. Chang. What is one thing that keeps you up at night, and what is one thing you're super optimistic about in the future?
Well, the one thing that I don't think anything keeps me up at night.
That's great.
But what comes the closest to keeping me up at night is the first topic that we discussed this afternoon. Which is decoupling, and it looks like countries are mad at each other, and that worries me. Most optimistic, I really think that this country, which is my country, United States, is still, the hope of the world, I think. That's in spite of all the problems we're having, but I think it still is a shining example of in the world.
And Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, Dr. Chang mentioned Graham Allison. So 6 years ago, after he wrote the book, Destined for War, The Thucydides Trap, he went to Beijing, and I went to hear him speak. And at the time, the question was, what keeps people up at night? What do you worry about in terms of a hot conflict? You know what people said? They didn't say U.S.-China because that was still at the very beginning of the U.S.-China conflict. They said North Korea. And now we're in the middle of a hot war, two hot wars, Russia and Ukraine and Israel-Hamas. The world is very dangerous and so unpredictable. That's the point I'm trying to make is, I worry about these hot conflicts, and I don't have the answer to how to resolve these conflicts, but they're very complicated things with a lot of history behind it, but that's what I worry about. And I hope that the two largest economies in the world don't somehow accidentally or by purpose get into a hot conflict.
And let's end on an optimistic note. What are you excited for the future about?
I'm excited about, so I've been doing a lot of traveling, been back in China since COVID. I have family in the United States. I have kids that go to school here. I've just been to Europe and the Middle East. What I'm optimistic about is that, generally speaking, people want peace and stability and an environment for to do business and have prosperity. And these conflicts, I know that there's a lot of extremism out there. I mean, we should do everything to try to stamp out extremist elements. But I still believe 99% of the people around the world are peace-loving and want to have prosperity for everybody, not just only for themselves.
Ladies and gentlemen, the extraordinary Dr. Morris Chang and Joe Tsai. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you both so much for being with us. Thank you all for attending. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.